Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be doing my top 9 most fun builds. You know how these list videos go. We're going to go through 9 different fun builds. Some of these are going to be theme builds as well, and at number 9, we're going to start with Blaidd's Build, which is a really good one. And the Royal Greatsword is pretty powerful. The only downside to this weapon is that it doesn't have innate frost on the weapon and has to build up only on the Ash of War. So the frost build up could be a little bit slow, but essentially it's Frost Lion's Claw. These are at rune level 150, so they're kind of in the meta range between 125 and 150. I know a lot of people play PvP, but if you're at a really high level and you invest a lot of points in strength and intelligence, this weapon can hit over 1000 AR. It also does decent posture damage on the Ash of War because it acts very much like Lion's Skull in that sense. It's going to give you the same posture damage, a really good amount of damage, and a little bit of frost build up on the Ash of War, although it definitely could be better. Blaidd's build overall does work though, because of the fact that the Royal Greatsword, even if you're at lower levels, you could end up with between 850 and 900 AR, which is impressive, and you get a really good Ash of War. It's definitely worth checking out, and we have a decent armor set too for some defense. His fighting style is using the Ash of War a lot. If you face him, he's going to use that pretty frequently. You can add in regular hits and whatnot, but the Ash of War is going to be the highlighting point and your best bet to build up frost because, again, it doesn't have any innate frost on the weapon. His set will also get you well over 51 poise, solid defense overall. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know for this one. For equipment, we have the Royal Greatsword plus 10. We have Eddie Seal for buffs. We have Blaidd set on. If you're wondering why I'm saying Blaidd, by the way, that's how to pronounce his name in the game. We have Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Dragongrass Great Shield Talisman. We have the Tree's Favorite plus 2, Magic tier, and Faith tier as well. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 31 Endurance. We have 40 Strength. That's going to be 60 when we two-hand this. We have 35 Intelligence, 18 Dexterity for the minimum requirement, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And for our buffs, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Restraint. And next up on this list at number 8, we have a Knight's Cavalry build. This is a full Knight's Cavalry build that uses Repeating Thrust and the Knight Rider's Glaive. There's also going to be an alternate version of this build that you could use too. That's also good. All footage is pretty random in terms of bosses and stuff. This is mostly spoiler-free with only a little bit from the DLC and no main bosses, but this is all New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus as well, so everything's maxed out in the base game and anything in DLC. And the whole concept here is going to be using Repeating Thrust in Heavy Affinity. We'll get an S in Heavy Affinity with the Knight Rider's Glaive, build up successive attack damage and hits as much as you can, and take advantage of the very good AR and moveset that we have with the Knight Rider's Glaive. Alright, second here, we're going to go over stats, equipment, everything you need to know, and then we're going to show an alternate build, which you can also do with Giant Hunt, which is amazing. Decent for poise damage, although on New Game Plus 7, it's really hard to break anything. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Heavy Knight Rider Glaive, plus 25, preferably Repeating Thrust. We have the Claw Mark Seal. We have the Knight's Cavalry set on with the Helm altered. We have the Dragongrass Great Shield Talisman, Melissen's Prosthesis, Rod and Wing Sword Insignia. We have the Shard of Alexander, and then we have the Thorny tier and Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 33 Endurance. We have 70 Strength. That's going to be 99 when we two-hand this, of course. 17 Dexterity with Melissen's Prosthesis. 15 Faith. That's going to be 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We, of course, hit over 51 Poise. We're also going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Strength as well. And I want to show this real quick. You could also use Giant Hunt with Ritual Sword Talisman, Tree's Favorite plus 2, Shard of Alexander, and Dragongrass Great Shield Talisman. You could use the Poise Breaking tier 2. That's also an awesome add, and this would fit the Knight's Cavalry theme as well. And of course, you're going to go for poise damage and whatnot, but the bigger deal here is, even on New Game Plus 7, is Giant Hunt does a lot of damage. You're going to get over 3,000 damage per Giant Hunt just using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Strength, which is pretty incredible. It's going to be difficult to poise break, though, on max scaling. And the reason for that is, if you didn't know, by the time you get to New Game Plus 7, poise is increased by over 30% in total, so poise breaking and poise breaking builds become a lot more difficult. That being said, I'm still impressed with Giant Hunt as a whole. It's relative in terms of damage to Lion's Claw. By the way, all these are ranked into my own personal, fun list, but for you, they may vary. These aren't ranked in terms of power, they're more ranked in terms of fun, and I had fun with a lot of these, pretty much all of them. That's the whole point of them, and I really did have a good time making some of the theme builds and whatnot. Speaking of themes, we're going to jump into number 7, which is going to be a Kratos build. So Kratos, of course, comes from God of War, and our main hand is going to be the Battle Axe, which we're going to use in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist. That's going to fit his abilities, and then, of course, we're going to use the Magma Blades as well as our alternate for a Frost and Fire build. And of course, we're going to switch to jump attacks eventually as well using the magma blades because that's a huge advantage there in terms of damage. But we could use the ability, the Ash of War too, for a lot of damage. And then our main hand, get the frost build up with chilling mist and try to get as many hits in as we can with a battle axe. Now, in terms of making your character look like Kratos, I left that video in the description below. The person that did that did an awesome job. Those are the sliders I used, and it came out amazing. It really does look like Kratos from God of War, and it comes out pretty much perfect in terms of his actual look. We're going to go over the armor I chose, though, when we go over equipment. And I like the way this came out ultimately. I really enjoy playing as this character. It's enjoyable to be Kratos from God of War. I haven't played the most recent God of War. I probably should. I played the old ones though. I do enjoy the stories and gameplay for the most part, although I mostly enjoy more challenging games as a whole. So the Magma Blade's Ash of War Magma Shower is incredible. If you haven't noticed, by the way, I used it several times throughout the fight here. And then the regular axe is just going to be okay. But the big deal there is that you're going to be able to build up frost quick between the regular hits and chilling mist. Speaking of which, if you want to see any more theme builds, comment below what you want to see made into a build after you're done with this video, after you watch this video. Be sure to comment and let me know what theme builds you want to see next, what fun builds you want to see next. And if there's any weapons I haven't covered either, be sure to comment that also. And there we go, we're going to finish the Godskin duo here. A challenging fight, always on New Game Plus 7, but nothing compared to DLC. DLC is getting crazy, man. New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus. If you want to check out that video too, the most broken builds, I left that one in the description. Also, that's a really great video if you're looking for the best builds. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And for equipment, of course, we're going to have one Magma Blade plus 10. We also have the Battle Axe in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist. We're using any seal for buffs. We have another Magma Blade plus 10. Of course, we have the Champion Pauldron. We have the Elden Lord Bracers. And then we have the Elden Lord Greaves as well. We also have the Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2, Crimson Burst Crystal Tier, Flame Tier, and then we're using Sleeping Pots for this fight. And we also are using Morgoth's Great Rune to give us the power of somebody who would have, like, well, almost the power of a god without fully being a god. We have 60 Vigor, we have 40 Strength, that's going to be 60 when you two-hand anything, 40 Faith, we're using Golden Vow, Black Flame's Protection, and Blessing of the Erdtree. And next up here at number 6, we have a Black Flame Monk build. Now, I've been looking to revisit the Godslayer's Greatsword since it was buffed again and the Hyper Armor is back, and honestly, I was really impressed. This weapon is back to being incredible. It's an awesome weapon. Now, there are a few things I don't like about the Godslayer's Greatsword. It has 3 very hefty stat requirements. It's going to scale it pretty equally with Dexterity and Faith too. And then, of course, it's going to have a requirement of around 20 Strength as well. It actually has 3 scaling stats. And of course, the Queen's Black Flame is a little bit on the slow side in terms of using the Ash of War, but you can see here 8,000 damage on the Ash of War. We're fighting a regular NPC, but still, and we're able to completely fight through and not get knocked back because they fixed the Hyper Armor again. This weapon is back to being very, very good. If you can get the Ash of War off, it does an insane amount of damage. Let's jump into equipment. And for equipment, we have the Godslayer's Greatsword plus 10 preferably. We have the Godslayer's Seal. We have the Black Flame Monk set on, along with the Solitude Gauntlets to give us 51 poise. Fire Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon. We have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Flame Tier, and Dexterity Tier. The Godfrey Icon, by the way, is for all of your incantations, which include Black Flame Fireball and Scouring Black Flame. We have 60 Vigor, we have 40 Faith, we have 50 Dexterity with the Dexterity tier, we have 20 Strength, 30 Endurance, 21 Mind. And of course, we hit over 51 Poise. The Black Flame Monk set by itself is going to hit 50. We're using Golden Vow Flame Ray of Strength. And next up here at number 5, we have the Fire Knight upgraded. Now, the Fire Knight set I wasn't a huge fan of. It doesn't give you enough armor, so I decided to go with a mix of the Solitude set and the Knight's Calvary set. And then, of course, we're using an Iron Greatsword, which has awesome damage, even in Fire Affinity, and then a shield as well. This will allow you to use the awesome Ash of War that is Flame Spear, which is chargeable, does massive fire damage, and will give you over 850 AR for the Iron Greatsword, which is pretty amazing. And then we can block with the shield when need be as well. Yeah, this ends up being a pretty good build overall. This is something you use for a lot of situations. If you're at higher levels, you can use an even more powerful shield and the full Solitude set for a lot of defense. It really does offer a lot of armor. I like that set. It's a fantastic addition to the heavy armor sets. All right, in a second here, we're going to jump into equipment stats, everything you need to know for this awesome and fun Fire Knight, kind of different Fire Knight build here. Let's jump into equipment now. And for equipment, we have the Fire Iron Greatsword plus 25 Fire Affinity with Flame Spear, of course. And we're using the Banished Knight Shield. You could use the Claw Mark Seal that would fit this build. Part of the Solitude set as well as Knight's Cavalry. Then we have Arsenal Charms plus 1 or Great Jar's Arsenal, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2, Godfrey Icon, Shard of Alexander, Flame Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. All right, and we're going to go right in now and talk about the stats. We have 60 vigor, 21 mind, 33 endurance, 70 strength, 12 dexterity, 25 faith with the faith here. And then we're going to be using golden bound flame weapon strength. We have a lot of poise and defense with this build, around 79 poise, solid defense too. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on awesome Elden Ring content. I'm going to be covering some other challenging games. I've been covering Black Myth as well. Next up here at number 4, we have one of my favorites on this list. We're getting into my most favorite ones, and we have Vyke's Build. Now, this build is amazing in terms of range damage because we're going to have Frenzied Burst, right? And that's chargeable, does a lot of fire damage, and we get hit pretty hard from a range. As you can see on the dragon here, we took a lot of his HP off right away. And then when we get up close, we have Vyke's War Spear as well. By the way, if you're ever facing this dragon and he does this move, you're just going to get on your horse and run away from this move because this move does a lot of area effect damage in terms of the rot, and you'll end up with Scarlet Rot as well, which you don't want to have to deal with when you're facing this dragon because he has a lot of HP, especially on New Game Plus 7. Yeah, I think he actually has around 40,000 or so, 38,000 or something on New Game Plus 7, something like that, around 40. But anyways, we're going to head towards him. We're going to continue facing him. We're going to use the Flame of Frenzy, of course, as well as Vyke's War Spear up close. Now, for those that don't know, Vyke's War Spear is absolutely better in PvP. It's more of a PvP weapon because the big selling point on it is Madness build-up, which really doesn't work that well in PvE. However, it does decent fire damage, and the Flame of Frenzy incantations are pretty good. Yeah, and the fire damage on the dragon ultimately is going to be great too because he does take a little bit of additional fire damage. I think it actually might be double fire damage. I'm not sure on that. He might take more than the tree avatars in terms of fire. Our weapon, by the way, is dexterity and faith as far as the scaling goes. So you're going to put a decent amount of points into dexterity, a good amount of points in faith as well, and then you're going to use the Frenzied Seal for the best damage output with the damage boost, especially given the fact that we have faith and dexterity investment. Your scaling should be close to about 250 or so. It's not going to be anything incredible. Unfortunately, the Frenzied Seal does not have the best scaling, but since we have to invest points in dexterity to get a decent amount of damage out of the War Spear, we're not going to get incredible scaling from a lot of the other seals as well. I really like backing off and using Frenzied Burst, though. Charging that up, it does really good damage. It has so much range. You can stand away from whatever you're facing and just dish out a good amount of fire damage. And of course, that's what we're going to continue to do. We finished off the dragon with the Flame of Frenzy. A really awesome incantation. Of course, we went mad at the end here. And then I forgot I had FP. But ultimately, Vyke's War Spear has a really cool Ash of War. Definitely better for PvP and against NPC invaders than it is against bosses. The incantations, though, are absolutely viable. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And of course, we have Vyke's War Spear plus 10. We have the Frenzied Seal plus 10. We have Vyke's full armor set. That's the fingerprint set. We have the Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon. We have Dragon Crest, Great Shield, Talisman, Flame Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. All right, and stats on this one. As we mentioned, we are a Dexterity and Faith build. So we have 45 Dexterity, 55 Faith with the Faith Tier. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 26 Endurance, 16 Strength. And then we have the Golden Vow Incantation, Hellish Rebury, that fits this well. 51 Poise we hit. We have the Frenzied Burst Incantation and Flame of Frenzy. And at number 3, we have Messmer's build. This is going to be a Messmer cosplay build. This is pretty amazing. It's built around the spear. I end up getting beat up here because the animation is just so long on this Ash of War. But if you get through the entire thing, it does a ton of damage. Yeah, this can hit really hard, and you'd be surprised at the range on the first part of the spear. Messmer spear is incredible. This is going to be built mainly around just using the spear because the Ash of War is going to be mainly what we focus on, but also it's quite good. It really is a good dexterity and faith weapon. If you haven't tried it out, be sure to try it out. Now, it's not the most consistent Ash of War. I do wish it had better hyper armor on the entire thing, because if you had hyper armor during the entire thing, it would be much better because we'd be able to hit through all of it. Maybe even some damage reduction with the Ash of War for PvE would be excellent. And what I mean by damage reduction is the same thing as Lion's Call, where if you're in the air, you could take reduced damage. You don't really get that with this. You have to go through the entire animation at the risk of having your whole HP bar go down relatively fast. Against DLC bosses, that could be really tough. With all that said, though, it doesn't matter too much in terms of the base game bosses. You can have a lot of fun with this one. And for DLC, you're just going to have to practice the timing with it. It is very difficult to pull off the whole thing, though, especially if you're on New Game Plus 7 for some of those DLC bosses. With that said, though, a lot of fire damage on the Ash. Excellent dexterity and faith weapon. Just needs a little bit of a buff. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And we have Messmer's Spear, Spear of the Impaler plus 10. We have the Fire Knight Seal. I'm going to explain that in a second. We're using Messmer's whole armor set here. We have the Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Melissen's Prosthesis, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Flame Tier, and Faith Tier as well. So I wasn't able to split and hit the high faith that I wanted from Messmer's Orb, but if you're at a higher level, you could run the Fire Knight seal and then use Messmer's Orb. If you want to as well, the Godfrey icon would work because it is chargeable. We're also using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Strength. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 50 Dexterity, 55 Faith with the Faith tier, and then we only have 34 Poise with Messmer's set. It's not the best in terms of that. Next up here, we have one of my two favorites on this list, and that goes without saying. At number 2, we have the Blood Dragon Man. Originally, I was going to do this with his actual weapon with the Dragon Hunter's Katana, but the problem is splitting 3 stats. Having Faith, having Arcane, and then having Dexterity on top of that on mostly a quality weapon was a little bit difficult. So I decided to use the starting katana, throw it on a Colt, and then get a lot of bleed build up with Bloodblade Ash of War, which is going to be an excellent addition to this build. And then we're using the Rock Heart. Of course, we don't have a lot of defense, but we are boosting Dragon Communion by 20% by using that Rock Heart. And by the way, we're using the Dragon Communion seal as well, and if you use 2, the boost is going to be incredible. So if you are on New Game Plus and beyond, you end up using 2, switching off the Bloodblade starting katana, you could end up boosting the Dragon Communion incantations by a ridiculous amount. I like the Dragon Ice and, of course, Glintstone Breath. Let's jump into equipment and stats. For equipment, we have the Dragon Communion Seal. We have 2 of them, but we're mainly just using 1. We have the Bloodblade starting katana on a Colt. We have the Roar Medallion, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Blue Dancer Charm. We have the Shard of Alexander. We have Magic Scorpion Charm, Faith tier. That's Margit Shackle that could stun that boss. By the way, it's an item. Let's jump into stats. By the way, since we have a light equipment load with this dragon setup and only 10 defense, which isn't incredible, that's what you end up with the Rock Heart because you can't use armor. You could use the Blue Dancer Charm for 12% more damage. That's why I was using it. On Bloodblade and any physical damage. 60 Vigor, we have 45 Faith and 50 Arcane, Golden Vow, Flame Grip Strength, Glintstone Breath, Glintstone Ice. You can add in Rot Breath if you want to as well. It's another good one. And Dragon Claw and Dragon Maw. At number 1, we have the Guts build. This is built around Guts from Berserk, and this is an incredible build that uses Savage Lion's Claw and Guts Greatsword. So I didn't do anything incredible with the sliders for this one. I found a couple, but I couldn't find any that were like spot on. So ultimately I just went for like a 5 on the facial structure, 5 on the hair, darken the hair, and then kind of like fit everything else in pretty lightly. It's pretty loosely based on Guts in terms of the pure aesthetics. But of course the build is built around Guts Greatsword with Savage Lion's Claw for an incredible and powerful anime build. And of course, the most fun build on this list, and probably the one you're most likely to use, because Guts Greatsword is incredible. You add Savage Lion's Claw in with that, you go for heavy affinity, you get massive physical damage, and some great poise damage too. And of course, we're just going to continue hitting him and using the Ash of War as much as possible, because we're using a character that's going to be mostly just, enraged and angry most of the time. So yeah, he's going to try to hit as much as possible, use Savage Lion's Claw to kind of get that whole anime set up. And honestly, it's an incredible Ash of War. I love that they added that in DLC, and they recently buffed it in 1.13 too, so it's pretty good. And if you want to see any more anime characters, if you want to see me do more theme builds, I mentioned this earlier, but be sure to comment below on what you want to see. If there's a general consensus or a name pops up a lot, I will definitely look into trying to make the best possible build for it. You know what? Why not do this? The top 5 in the comment section in terms of likes for characters will get turned into builds. Let's just do that. It's just going to turn them into builds. So whatever the 5 most liked ones are in the comment section are going to be turned into a build list video for more theme builds. Let's jump into equipment. With a shout out for the original person that put in the comment as well. We have Guts Greatsword with Savage Lion's Claw and Heavy Affinity, any seal for buffs. We're using part of the Knight's Calvary and this Solitude set. That was the best I could do here in terms of his armor. Arsenal Charm +1 or Great Jar's Arsenal. Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Blade of Mercy if you get some posture breaks. If you don't, the Ritual Sword Talisman is going to be better. Basically, if you're on New Game or New Game Plus, Blade of Mercy is going to be excellent there because you're going to get a whole bunch of poise breaks. We have the Shard of Alexander as well, of course, for the weapon art. Yeah, you want to use that mainly if you're on lower New Game cycles. Green Burst, Crystal tier, Faith tier. Otherwise, run the Shard, Ritual Sword. Let's jump to stats. And we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 33 Endurance. We have 70 Strength, it's going to be 99 when we two-hand this. 12 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We have 62 poise, some decent defense in this build, over 40% on base game. It's going to be a lot in DLC too. We have Golden Vow and Flame Grip Strength. Those are buffs. And thanks for watching this one. I appreciate everybody tuning in for my top 9 most fun builds with a lot of theme builds in here. This is our heavier armor set for Guts. I originally tried this initially, but it was just too much in terms of the armor. Be sure to sub if you have not subbed to the channel yet. Definitely be sure to hit the subscribe button for more awesome Elden Ring content. And of course, be sure to check out in the description if you're looking for more of the broken, overpowered build stuff on New Game Plus 7 that can keep you alive as well. Be sure to check that out in the description below. I left my top 20 there. Have a great day.